The rain started before dinner, the soft Oregon kind that makes the roof breathe and the windows turn milky with heat. I laid the table like always, 2 plates, not 3 anymore, and I heard my phone buzz on the counter. A voicemail lit up in a red dot. "Thomas," the lawyer's voice said, clipped and sober, "call me as soon as you can." He did not add please. He did not soften the edges. I set the phone down like it had grown heavier. Across from me, my daughter Eva smiled over the rim of her water glass. "You're quiet tonight," she said, the way people talk to a door they own. I nodded, cut the salmon, asked about her week. She told me about a design pitch and how a client wanted everything yesterday. The rain stitched up the silence. I ate, I listened, I laughed in the right places. Later, with the kitchen clean and the house dim, I opened my desk drawer, slid out the file where I keep the ordinary bones of life: passport, old tax returns, the deed in a plastic sleeve. On my laptop, an email from a month ago sat in the inbox, flagged, like I had known I would need it. Attached, a scanned copy of a power of attorney I'd signed 2 years earlier, after my wife passed. In the scan, the notary stamp looked as if someone had breathed on it. The edges blurred, the date light. The signature that was mine moved the way my hand moved, but the witness signature I couldn't place. I watched the screen and felt a neat click inside my chest, the way things line up when they shouldn't. I printed bank statements, the ones with the curls of numbers that usually rock me to sleep. This time, the lines woke me, repeating transfers. 9,500, $10,000, 9,800, all to an entity I'd never seen, Elysian Designs, LLC. The name looked blameless, like candlelight. The amount stayed below a threshold, as if the money were learning to duck. I flipped through pages until my thumb felt inky. Each transfer was a breadcrumb. Each date corresponds to weeks I had been told about business expenses I'll reimburse soon, Dad. I have spent a career tightening bolts until machines hold their shape in bad weather. So I did what I know. I wrote things down: date, time, account, amount. I kept notes that could be read by a stranger, a judge, a banker, a man paid by the county to listen. I did not accuse. I did not erupt. Quiet justice is not about volume. It is about direction. When rain lets up in Maple Ridge, the air smells like wood and iron. In that air, I called the lawyer back from the car, with the garage door still open. He explained the voicemail in simple planks, a review of my accounts that raised red flags, activity that made my name look like a door anyone could open, a question about the scope of that old power of attorney. His language never touched panic. He asked, "Do you feel comfortable?" It was both a legal and a human question. "I do," I said, and I hung up. That night, I walked across the street and knocked on my neighbor's door. Dolores used to be a notary. She tells time by ledger lines. "Can I put a few things in your safe for a while?" I asked. She looked the way grandmothers look when a child shows up with a broken toy. I handed her my passport, the property deed, the life insurance folder I hadn't opened since we buried Margaret. I told her I was in the middle of sorting something complicated, and I would feel better if the originals were not in my house. She nodded and did not ask why. I decided 2 things before sleep. I would act like nothing had changed, and I would stop letting everything change in front of me. How to, briefly. When you suspect misuse of a power of attorney, do not confront first. Document first. Dates, amounts, names, and quietly secure originals of critical documents in a safe location. This is not legal advice. Consult a local professional. On Monday, the branch smelled like paper and mint gum. The manager, Marisol, knows me by name. The way small towns and honest work create a kind of recognition. I asked to speak privately about irregular activity. I use the word irregular because it keeps doors open. She closed the office door, pulled up my accounts, and the numbers arranged themselves like wind chimes in a storm. There's a pattern, she said, tracing the transfers with her cursor. She offered to place a temporary hold on further outgoing wires and print me statements with the bank's stamp, so no one could say later that I invented any of it. I signed the bank's form. She lined up a stamp that thumped like a gavel. Received, reviewed, certified. I called an elder law attorney with no connection to anyone I knew. The assistant asked kind questions and gave me a time. I brought a manila folder, stamped statements, the scanned POA, the wire receipts. The lawyer wore a tie that looked like October. He paged through the folder and spoke slowly. A power of attorney is a tool, he said, and like any tool, it can be used to fix or to pry. He explained that I could revoke the POA and notify any institution that had honored it. He talked about scope, durability, and fiduciary duty, words that sound like fences when you place them correctly. He did not once tell me to shout. At home, I took out a small pocket recorder I had purchased after a friend's estate fell apart in a matter of weeks. Oregon lets one party record a conversation they are in. I tested the battery, slid it into the sleeve of a book, and set the book on the porch table where Eva and I drink tea on Sundays. This was not a trap. It was a mirror. My plan was simple. Mention that I was considering listing the house I love to fund a trust for my grandson, Leo, and watch how the air moves. We sat in the daylight that makes the pines look dusted with flour. I've been thinking, I said. Maybe it's time to sell this place. Move somewhere smaller. I watched her eyes, not her mouth. A pause I did not know her for. Just a beat too long. Then, that could be good. We'll make sure everything is safe. If anything happens with your memory, we should think about getting a conservatorship, just temporary, so people can't take advantage. She lifted her teacup, as if what she had said was ordinary, like the weather. I asked, still soft, "Do you have the original POA? I think it's time I review it." She said she'd look. There are many kinds of no. That one was wrapped in silk. I made an appointment with Dr. Peter Lang, a geriatric psychiatrist in the city who takes apart memory with care. We spent an hour in a room that smelled like sharpened pencils. He gave me tests that measured not just what I remembered, but how I remembered it. He asked about my routine, my planning, whether my days have edges. When he was done, he printed a letter that said I was competent to manage my affairs. He handed me a sealed copy. Open it when you need to. And one I could read. Competent. The words sat with me like a chair that held. Raj Patel is a forensic accountant with a smile that makes bad news feel like arithmetic. He prefers large paper. On his table, he drew lines and arrows from my account out to Elysian Designs, LLC, and then further, to a different bank, a different city, a person I had never met. He said money talks, but it often whispers. He showed me the rhythm. Amounts just under $10,000. Transfers on Fridays. Invoices numbered out of sequence. He stapled the printouts, circled dates, and put it all in a neat stack. You will want a timeline, he said. Judges like to see that time makes sense. I stopped by Dolores's again. She pulled a magnifier out of a drawer like an old detective. We looked at the scanned notarization. Ink flow, she said, tapping the printout. This looks like a stamp pressed from a second-generation copy. The year smudges. Real stamps leave teeth. Raised impressions. See? We compared pen pressure. That witness signature, she said. I'd want to see a log. She jotted her observations on a yellow pad and handed me the page. It was not proof. It was a trailhead. On the porch, the recorder sat still as a pebble. I walked by it and pretended not to think about it. I baked a chicken. I asked Eva how her project was going. She told me about delays and clients who wanted to be courted like royalty and paid like misers. The rain left, and the eaves dripped in a metronome. I found it easy to breathe when I had a plan. How to, briefly. Work in parallel tracks. Bank safeguards, temporary holds, stamp statements, independent capacity evaluation, and a neutral forensic money map. If you record conversations, confirm your local law about consent, and keep your process steady and calm. This is not legal advice. Consult a local professional. The day I drew my line, the house grew very quiet. I typed the words revocation of power of attorney at the top of a letter in a font sturdy enough to lean on. I listed the original date, the scope I had granted, and the sentence that unbuilt it. I hereby revoke and rescind any and all powers granted under that instrument. I printed 4 copies. I went to the post office and mailed them certified. 1 to my daughter's address, 1 to the bank, 1 to the insurance company, 1 to my file. The clerk slid green return receipts across the counter. Sign here, he said. The ink felt like a small ceremony. The proofs would come back with dates stamped by a machine that does not know me but records that I stood here. Next, I called my primary care office and updated my healthcare proxy, appointing my neighbor as a temporary decision maker if I could not decide. I did this not because I expected to fail, but because boundaries make good weather even when storms come. I told the bank, in writing, that any transactions under the old POA should be denied. I told the insurance company I suspected a change had been filed on my beneficiary designation. The agent put me on hold, and then returned with the tone people use when they have found a misfiled will. There is a change request on record, she said. We can place a freeze pending investigation. I asked for a copy of the change form. It arrived 2 days later and sat in my hands like a photograph I didn't remember posing for. The handwriting that claimed to be mine curved differently, and my middle initial had a habit mine does not. I placed all of it, the revocation with its green slips, the stamped bank statements, the capacity letter, the suspect beneficiary form, Dolores's notes, Raj's map, on my dining room table, aligned at the corners. The papers formed a kind of quiet choir, each sheet singing one true note. Across the table sat my event log, a spiral-bound notebook with dates and times, names, summaries, short sentences that would not drown me later. Sunday, 4:15 p.m. Discussed selling house. Eva suggested temporary conservatorship for safety if memory goes. I put quotation marks around her exact phrase. It is a dignified thing to quote someone accurately. I invited Eva over for tea a week after the letters went out. She came in with the smell of rain in her hair and a smile that looked trained. On the porch, the pocket recorder rested under the trivial weight of a coaster. I did not want a fight. I wanted a record. "I've been tidying up some paperwork," I said. "You'll get something in the mail from me." She tilted her head. "What about?" I said, "I've revoked the power of attorney I gave you. I'll be managing my affairs directly now, with professional oversight." She did not blink. "That's disappointing," she said, and then she smoothed it over like smoothing a bedsheet over a stain. "I just want to keep you safe." "Safety is a good word," I said. "So are clarity and consent." I asked again, gently, for the original POA. She said she couldn't find it, but would keep looking. My recorder preserved the words without storing the heat. I changed the subject to my grandson's new spelling test and the hawks that had nested high in the fir tree. That night, her text came in. "Dad, this is going too far. If you're confused, we need to take steps now before something irreversible happens." Words like confused and irreversible are heavy when dropped from a height. I did not pick them up. I replied, "I'm clear. I'm documenting, and I'm safe. If you need to discuss finances, we'll do it with a third party present." The next morning, I found a soft envelope in my mailbox. A handwritten letter from my daughter called "For Your Protection." She wrote about fatigue, forgetting appointments, how I repeated stories sometimes. She used phrases like temporary guardianship and "just until things stabilize." The letter was kind on its surface and hungry underneath. I placed it under the weight of a paperclip that had been on my desk since 1992. I called the court clerk to understand the filing process for conservatorships in our county, not because I wanted to use it, but because I wanted to speak the language of any motion that might be filed against me. The clerk was brisk and kind. She told me what forms exist, how hearings are scheduled, how to file a response. She did not give advice. She gave the kind of facts you can quote in daylight. Late that afternoon, Dolores knocked. She had been thinking about the notary stamp. She had pulled examples from her own past logs, the way an old seamstress pulls swatches. She pointed to the raised edges that real stamps leave, the embossing you can feel with your finger. "If they present a clean original," she said, "look for pressure patterns. Ink soaks differently in the heat." I thanked her. I did not say the thing I was thinking, that sometimes the people we love also learn to counterfeit. The file on my table had grown into a life raft. Revocation letter with certified mail receipts, bank statements with rubber stamps, a beneficiary change form with handwriting that bent wrong, a capacity evaluation letter, sealed and unsealed, a timeline drawn by Raj, arrows from my account into a company I never did business with, a page of notes by a woman who once notarized the signatures of men who didn't always deserve to be trusted, and a slim recorder that held a conversation where my daughter proposed a mechanism to take my voice away, just temporarily, for safety. How to, briefly. To set boundaries, use instruments that leave tracks, certified mail, written notices to institutions, updated proxies. Keep an event log with dates, times, direct quotes. Ask for originals and compare signatures and stamp characteristics. This is not legal advice. Consult a local professional. On a Tuesday, the sky went the color of old pewter. A letter from the court arrived in a windowed envelope. Hearing set for the following week on a petition for temporary conservatorship. Petitioner, my daughter. I ran my hand along the paper's edge and felt how clean bureaucracy can be. On my dining table, the file did not flinch. The green certified mail receipts were clipped like leaves. The bank statements wore their blue rectangular stamps. Raj's flow map, oversized and blunt, pointed to Elysian Designs, LLC, with an arrow that could have been a spear. I placed Dr. Lang's capacity letter on top, competent, to remind myself that words, when correctly placed, carry weight through doors. At the branch, Marisol printed a short affidavit about the wire pattern and stapled the stamped pages again so no corner could drift. Bring the originals and a set of copies, she said, handing me folders with pockets. Courts like order. Dolores met me that evening with her yellow notepad, the one where she'd written about ink flow and pressure. I asked if she would be willing to appear if called. She nodded, then held my hand for a moment, the way a witness steadies a banister. The night before the hearing, I sat on the porch with the recorder in my palm. I scrolled to a time-stamped file, Sunday, 3:02 p.m., and listened to our tea conversation playback, two voices moving carefully around the word safety. The recorder was not vindictive. It was exact. I placed it into a small zip bag, labeled the bag with the date and time, and slid it into the folder I would carry. I slept like a man who had packed for an early flight. The courthouse smelled like old paper and cold marble. I wore my navy jacket. Eva stood with a lawyer I did not know, her face arranged into concern. When the judge entered, everyone's bones learned posture. Eva's counsel spoke first, each sentence lifting a picture of a father slipping, a house filled with drafts, unpaid bills towering like cairns. He used phrases I had expected: confusion, repetition, vulnerability. He noted that a house sale was being entertained and that urgent protective measures were required. My attorney, the October tie steady against his shirt, only nodded. When he spoke, he did not untie the other man's sentences. He laid our own on the table. He began with a timeline: dates, amounts, 9,500, 9,800 juice, Fridays, Elysian Designs, LLC. He handed up stamped bank statements. He handed up the revocation letter with the green slip stapled, receipts acknowledging delivery. He handed up the capacity evaluation and the letter Dr. Lang had written in language a judge can live with. He handed up Raj's diagram, the oversized page that clarified movement, the way a river map clarifies danger. He introduced Marisol, who testified like a person who balances drawers down to the penny. Pattern recognition, she called it, and out of character for the account holder. Then it was Raj, who walked the court through benign-sounding invoices that were not supported by actual work, sequences out of order, and destination accounts that did not match the story in the petition. He did not accuse anyone by name. He showed the math and let it speak. Dolores followed, soft-voiced, explaining stamp impressions, the way authentic notary seals leave a bite in the paper. She admitted she could not declare a fraud. She could testify to characteristics inconsistent with originals. She used the word inconsistent the way a surgeon uses the word lesion: precise, careful, not theatrical. Finally, my lawyer asked to play a short audio clip. The judge leaned back, one brow tilted. We listened to my voice ask about selling the house and putting proceeds into a trust for Leo. We listened to my daughter suggest temporary conservatorship in case memory goes, her tone syruped with care. The judge did not change expression. He simply looked down to the petition papers and back to the audio recorder on the table, a pocket-sized fact. When I spoke, I kept my hands where nerves couldn't show. Your Honor, I said, I have managed machines that demanded attention to sequence. I am applying the same to my life. I revoked the instrument that allowed these transfers. I notified institutions in writing. I sought an independent evaluation and brought it to you sealed. I am competent. I am not seeking punishment today. I am seeking air to breathe. The judge nodded once, then asked Eva's counsel a question about alternatives less restrictive than conservatorship. He asked about account freezes, about third-party oversight on transactions, about voluntary transparency. The other lawyer tried to pull the word confusion back into the room, but it had lost weight. The judge ruled from the bench, voice even. The petition for temporary conservatorship is denied. The court orders temporary restraints on accounts associated with Elysian Designs, LLC, pending further review. The court directs the parties to work through counsel on a restitution plan as appropriate. Any questions of forgery or fraud are referred to the district attorney for review. The gavel did not slam. It was a sound like a door closing gently because someone remembered there were sleeping people in the house. Outside, Eva stood near a column, twisting the strap of her bag. She looked at me as if she were trying to decode a language she had spoken as a child and then forgotten. I was trying to help, she said. I did not say yes, and I did not say no. This is what help looks like now, I said. Written plans. Third-party eyes. Schedules that don't lie. She nodded once, a stiff hinge. We walked away at different speeds. How to, briefly. In contested situations, bring witnesses who speak in documents, bank managers, independent clinicians, forensic specialists. Prepare originals plus clean copies and exhibit a clear timeline. If a less restrictive alternative exists, propose it before a court proposes it for you. This is not legal advice. Consult a local professional. The weeks after the hearing were a slow repair. The district attorney's office sent a letter acknowledging receipt of the referral. They would review and decide. The bank, under the court's temporary order, froze the accounts connected to that LLC. My attorney opened a dialogue about restitution. How much? How long? What steps would signal sincerity? Not everything can be solved by payment plans, but some things can begin there. I met with a family therapist who specialized in late-life boundaries. Her office had a bowl of smooth stones near the window. Pick one, she said, and carry it for a week. I chose a flat gray one that looked like it had once been a wave. We practiced sentences that guard without punishing. I will discuss finances in writing with a third party present. I will be generous with love and careful with money. We named grief without requiring theater. On a Saturday, I took the small wooden birdhouse off its bent nail. I sanded the roof where rain had raised a ridge, and I restained it so cedar could smell like cedar again. While the pieces dried, I opened the life insurance folder. The company had completed its review and sent a letter. The attempted beneficiary change was rejected due to signature discrepancies and procedural defects. They restored the original designation. The paper did not brag. It simply held. Across the table lay a new document, the trust for my grandson, Leo. A lawyer at a different firm had drawn it up with language that would make future storms less interesting. The house would be titled to the trust with guardrails that didn't rely on anyone's mood. 2 trustees, reports every quarter, distributions purposeful and specific. I initialed the margins where the pages requested initials. I signed where the signature lines waited. When we filed the deed transfer, the clerk slid it back through the glass with a smile that knew nothing and said everything. Recorded. Eva wrote me a letter, not an email, a letter, and used a pen that left little pools at the ends of words. She said she was sorry she had let stress talk her into shortcuts. She said she would agree to a restitution plan and counseling, and to the rules I had set for any contact about money. She did not ask for forgiveness. She promised compliance. I held the letter for a long time before I set it under a paperweight that used to sit on Margaret's desk. Some doors stay locked after we fix the hinges. Some we open a crack and leave the chain on. We met once, in a cafe with windows that faced the library. She arrived early and had already ordered tea. We did not hug. I placed a copy of the proposed payment schedule on the table. She read without talking. When she looked up, her face had the pale bravery of someone about to hold a hot pan. "I can do this," she said. I nodded. "We'll do this on paper," I said, and we both exhaled, just once, in the same rhythm. At home, I put the birdhouse back. I used a new nail and a level. I stepped back until the house and the tree agreed. The yard made the noises yards make when no one's performing. In the kitchen, I tucked the quiet choir of documents into a fresh binder with labeled tabs: revocation, bank, capacity, insurance, timeline, restitution, trust. I slid the binder onto the shelf where I keep the good pants. Quiet justice looks like this when no one is filming. A shelf that will hold weight. A file you can find in the dark. How to, briefly, after a legal decision, shift into repair with structure. Clear restitution terms, monitored accounts, trust instruments with dual control, and family therapy to address harm without reopening the wound. Write down boundary sentences you can use under stress and keep them visible. This is not legal advice. Consult a local professional. On a Sunday evening, I cooked salmon again. I set 2 plates because habit is a kind of lighthouse. My grandson, Leo, sat across from me, legs not yet reaching the chair rung, telling me the difference between meteors and meteorites. He asked why the birdhouse looked new. "It needed a stronger roof," I said. He nodded like a foreman. We ate, and afterward he held the flat gray stone from my pocket and asked if he could keep it. I told him it was already his. Ava sent a message later that night. "Thank you for the chance to fix this." I wrote back, "Thank you for choosing the work." The message didn't ring like a bell. It settled like dust. Peace in a family is not a verdict. It's a practice. In the last light, I stood at the window and looked at the glass turning amber. The house held its shape without trying to. The binder on the shelf didn't sing, but I knew every tab by heart. The porch smelled like cedar again. Somewhere above the tree line, the hawks were coasting, requiring neither apology nor applause to stay aloft. I thought about the word competent and how quietly courageous it is. And I thought about how love, to stay love, sometimes needs contracts written in ink you can't smudge. Quiet justice, if it needs a definition, is a calendar with dates circled not for court, but for gardening. It is the habit of telling the truth on paper before anyone asks you to. It is a voice you keep because you practice keeping it. And it is a door you can open to a child who will grow up knowing the difference between safety and silence. Comment CTA. Have you ever had to set firm financial boundaries with family? What sentence helped you keep both love and clarity?